So welcome back to the James Wingfield Racing channel. Tonight I've got another video for you guys. I hope you like the last few. We've had a bit of mixed content. We've had some race night highlights from the JWR iRacing Fun Nights, and we've also had a few more sort of technical, deeper dive into some of the more technical aspects of simulator racing, including how to learn tracks quickly and how to read those data traces and turn those into improvements that you can make in your own driving to make yourself quicker. So definitely go back and have a look at those if you haven't seen them. Tonight we've got something completely different for you. It's the other end of the spectrum. We're going to go a lot lighter. After a few of the technical ones today, we're going to be looking at how to create a livery. So we all want to race nice pretty cars in our simulator world. Some of us have got the real world racing cars that we're trying to replicate. Other times you might just want to design something that matches your favourite F1 car from years ago, or maybe you're just creative and you want to have a go at creating something that you like the look of. So I'm going to show you tonight how you can do that. And what you can use from the existing templates to make it a bit quicker and just make it look that little bit more polished. So let's have a look.
James Wingfield steals it!
Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, we're going to need to download the template for whichever car it is that you're going to be painting in iRacing. And then from there, we're also going to need some some photo editing software. Loads of different options out there, I'm sure. PaintShop Pro is one that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's a whole load on Apple computers as well, but personally I'm going to use the software called GIMP. It's a free download that you can access for Windows PC. Costs nothing to use, and actually it does seem really pretty good. I downloaded it specifically when I started doing liveries in iRacing, and I've done a few using it, and it's worked well for me. Since then I've actually even started using the software for other stuff, and all of my, like the JWR logo, I designed in the same software, and I've got different stickers and things designed and made up for my race car. So it definitely does seem to be a good piece of software. It does everything I ask of it, but I have to say I'm not really a graphic designer as such, and maybe there's other things out there that you guys have used instead that's better. So if you think there is, then let me know, put it in the comments below. But failing that, at least it's what I'm using at the moment, and so it's what I'm going to run through today in this software. So first of all, we're going to grab a template, and to do that I'm going to jump onto the iRacing BTUI. You can see here in the window I've just jumped straight into the BTUI, and we're going to go to the paint shop. Within the paint shop you're going to see all the different cars. I've painted a few of these. These you can see they're kind of default colour schemes that I've got selected. Even the white one here in the Formula Renault, I've actually submitted my own paint over the top of these, so they show up here but they don't actually show up when I jump in and race the cars, as you'll probably know if you've seen any of the footage from the JWR nights. The one I'm going to be working on tonight though is the Lamborghini. It's a fairly new car in iRacing. It's a GT3 endurance racer, and I've used it a little bit. I really like it, so I'm going to be using it a bit more. We're also potentially running a JWR race team for the Sebring 12 Hour that's coming up in a couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for any of the footage that we can put out from that. But if we're doing that and we're going to be putting some effort into practicing and racing, I thought it'd be quite nice to have a JWR livery that we can all use as well. So we're going to download the template, and once that's saved I'm going to jump back into the GIMP software and show you what it looks like. Okay, so we've downloaded the software and I've downloaded the template, so I've just opened it up in the GIMP program here, and you can see what's come in. So immediately you can kind of make out roughly what's going on here. It looks like we've got bits of a car. I guess this is the bonnet down here. You can see probably a bit of a roof and engine cover at the back. Lamborghini is written across the rear of the car, no doubt. It kind of makes sense. It's a bit hard to make out exactly what's what. So before I get into the details of how to actually make the car, I thought a little bit of an explanation of how this software works would be useful. So to do that, I'm going to show you over the right hand side here. We've actually got, by default in this template, there's 3 layer groups. You can see we've got 3 layer groups, and their order is important. So for now I'm going to turn off this middle one and expand the lower layer group of the paintable area. And within that group you can see we've got what's this sort of, well actually there's another group nested within that group, but other than that we've got 4 layers at the top here and 1 layer below, and you can see from the eye that they're all visible. The way this software works is it basically, consider it like different pages of a book. So the lowest level, the bottom page, is in this case the base layer, so it's all blue. If I turn off everything else, There we go, turned off everything else, so we're just showing one layer at the bottom which is blue. If I turn that one off as well, now there's actually nothing showing. This checkerboard image, sort of checkerboard effect, is how the software represents something that's translucent, that's invisible. So what we're looking at here is basically the file is a square of this size, but there's nothing visible in it. And if I turn on the first layer, that's just very simple, a single blue, in this case colour. It covers the whole page, so everything we're looking at is now blue. And as I look at colours, as I look at layers on top of it, it is literally that. So it's like another page sits on top. So when you look down, you see the top page first, and then anywhere that's got paint on it, you'll see. Anywhere that it's cut away and is invisible, you'll see through to the layer below. So the layer above this one is colour changes logos, so there's a bit of text here. Looks like some small text in a couple of other places as well. Number boards are on top of that. Car decals on top of that, and pitbox colours at the very top. So when I'm looking here, we've got a white box here, which is our number board. Underneath that is effectively the blue base, but because the layer's on top, you can't see any of the blue. Doesn't influence that colour at all. It's not like it bleeds through or anything like that, because it's got full opacity on the white, so we just see the whiteboard on top. So that's kind of how the software works, and you can build up your picture in lots of layers. The final finished product for iRacing, it doesn't matter how the layers are built up, it's only to make it easier when you're working in the file. All that you actually need to export at the very end is just a 2D picture, which is this square, and whatever colours each pixel are. The iRacing software kind of takes this 2D shape and it wraps it around the car, and makes a nice 3D finished car livery in the end. So that's the paintable area that we've got showing at the moment. So I'm going to condense that down again. I'm going to turn on this red layer group. So this is how the template was actually saved in the first place. This is what we're looking at. And as I say, you can sort of see roughly what the car looks like, but there's a little trick in here which helps us further. So if I expand that layer group, there's a few different layers within here. This bottom one in the group is the car mandatory, and if I toggle that on and off, you can see that there are some areas of the livery that it's saying we're not allowed to change, that they're forced to be whatever they are. So it looks like we're forced to have a Lamborghini badge. Some of these features are black. I don't know quite what they are at the moment. Wing mirrors, vents and things like that often. I have to say, take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Some cars, there are lots of fixed areas. Other cars, there's not. And it tends to tell you that there are, but you can sometimes get away with just turning them off and trying it. And you'll often get away with actually being able to paint that area. Certainly on the Radical, for example, the roll cage and the bit around the window, sort of the bottom of the windscreen area, is forced to be black, and there's nothing you can do about it. On other cars, I've turned off this car mandatory layer, and it's actually let me paint that bit of the car. There's a little bit of a trick which I tend to do when I first start painting a new car, which if I click on this, that is basically a livery to all intents and purposes. Very simple one, obviously, it's just purely a white square, and I'll export that, load it into the iRacing software, and when you jump in the car and have a look at what it looks like, you'll see that the car is basically all white, but there'll probably be sections of the car that are painted in different colours, and you can then tell immediately which bits you're not allowed to change. On the back of the car, there's usually a little band that shows blue if you're an A licensed driver, so that the cars behind you know that you're probably a safe driver to start racing against. And I think it's different colours for other licenses. I can't remember what they all were now as I came through the ranks. But that's quite a useful thing for the driver behind, and so it forces that over the top of your livery. On some of the single seaters, I think the Formula 3 has got the roll hoop camera, and the body of that camera is a licensed colour. So again, you can't change that. You can't change the bits of the numbers and sometimes the number panels. Often there are kind of car names, like the Mazda has got a Mazda written in the grille, and again across the top of the windscreen, and you can't change that either. So by just sending a purely white box, jump in the simulator, see which bits of the car aren't white, and then you know immediately that those bits, whatever you do in your livery, you can't overwrite them. And then I suppose just in case there's anything that's white and forced, I also tend to send a black box, and once I've sent and jumped in the car with a white one and a black one, you can see that anything that hasn't changed colour properly are the bits that you can't work on. So assuming we've done that, we're now looking at the actual template of our car itself. and this this layer group is quite useful. So car mandatory, as I say, you can consider it. I tend to turn it off. I don't really worry too much about it, and then I'll look at it later on if there's anything that's not changing colour how I want. Sponsor blocks, again, that covers the default areas if you're using the sponsors within the iRacing software. We're not going to be doing that, so I'm going to turn that one off as well. Number blocks, this is quite useful because it shows you where the numbers show up. I'm not quite sure what these bits are at the moment. I'll have to come back to that in a bit. But certainly these green squares are fairly obvious. It looks like we've got one on each door and one on the bonnet. Some of the GT cars have got position numbers as well, so it could be that it's that, or it might be something else. So we'll come back and have a look at those. The mask is the bit that turns it into a vague car shape, so quite helpful. And then this top one is wire, and that's really useful. So if you turn the wire on, it tends to give you a really good, or at least a much better impression of what you're looking at. So if I start to zoom in now, you can see this is the left-hand door by the looks of it. We've got a door handle up here, some kind of a vent down the side. I guess that's a fuel filler. But it gives you a bit of perspective as to what you're actually looking at. If I saved my livery like this and exported it, when I load it into the simulation, you will literally see all of these white lines drawn all over your car, which is probably not what you want ultimately, but it's really helpful when you're trying to work out which bit of car is which, and it's good when you're trying to put logos on the car and line them up. If you want a logo on the right hand door here, you might be able to line it up using this mesh and then put it in the equivalent position on the left hand door, and you know that it's the same point on the car and you've not got them sort of out of sequence, one further down the car or maybe one twisted and a bit wonky or something like that. On the engine cover here you can see the patterning of the engine cover, so when it comes to lining stripes up or logos across slats maybe, that will help us position things exactly where we want. So that wire layer is really helpful to bear in mind. I'll probably do most of the work with that turned on and then turn it off just at the end when I send the final design to the software. And then at the top here we've got the custom spec map, which is another layer group. Spec maps are a whole different thing that I will cover in a bit. I'm going to start by just doing the paint, which is the basic colours, and then the spec map is how iRacing refers to what the form of that colour takes. So is it metallic, is it reflective, is it matte, is it shiny, is it rough, is it smooth, and that's all dealt with in the spec map. So you'll see a lot of people talking about chrome, stickers, and you might have matte stickers and reflective glossy paint, for example, which is what I tend to do. So we'll come back and explain that towards the end of the video. So from here we're going to say that now we can see kind of what the car looks like. So in my instance, if you've seen any of the racing that we've done on the JWR nights, you'll know that my cars are red, typically with a yellow stripe. It's obviously based on my real world Caterham, and I like the colour, so I'm very happy to keep it going in iRacing. It's all part of my kind of brand. You see with the logo is the same kind of thing. So the way to do that, I'm going to start by going down to my base layer. You can select different layers. So if I select the base layer, and very simply at the moment I'm just going to take a red, I'm not going to worry too much about the precise colours or things like that. I'm just going to take a red colour, I'm going to select the whole layer and paint it red. So what I've done, if you remember I was talking about these layers, and we've got layers showing upon layers. If I turn them all off, what I've actually done is just painted the bottom base layer all red, and everything else that was on top of it is still showing on top of it. And because it's been done in layers, that was a really easy way to do it all in one go, and I've not had to sort of select the roof and then come up here and select the bonnet and the nose cone and all the rest of it individually, because it's basically all driven by one colour, by one layer. So I've got a nice consistent colour everywhere. And then the next thing to do is I'm going to try and put my yellow stripe down the car. So different ways of doing that. I would recommend putting a new layer in on top. So let's put a new layer here. There we go, bonnet stripe, that will do. And the first thing I could do is I'm going to select a yellow, and I could jump on with a paintbrush and I could draw my yellow stripe down the middle. It kind of works. It's all fuzzy around the edges, it's not going to be lined up with the middle, it's probably not straight, so it's very coarse, and it's not the right way to do it. So rather than jump on and attack it with a paintbrush, much like you wouldn't do that in real life, I'm not going to do it here. A better way might be to use the selection box and then fill it with a solid yellow colour. So at least now I've got a nice sharp edge, but again, if I zoom in, it's going to take a bit of fiddling to get that exactly lined up, to get it nice and central on the car and to get it all the right widths. So although it works and it's possible to do it that way, what I would recommend is we can cheat a little bit and use the hard work that the guys at iRacing done for us. So over here on the right hand side you'll see this layer called car patterns, and for this bit I'm actually going to turn off some of these other layers that I'm not too interested in just yet. So there we go, I'll keep it like that. Mask and wire are on, everything else is off. So in the car patterns, this is a layer group. I'm going to expand it, and remember, as we said before, if I turn that whole layer pattern on, as we said before, these are all layers. So this one at the bottom here, 23, is showing, but if I turn it on and off, nothing changes because it's got all the other layers built on top of it. So all I'm actually seeing is the top level. So this top level layer 1 is what we're seeing at the moment. And it looks like it's basically coincidentally a red car again, but it's basically a red car with green trim on it. What I'm after is something that I can basically rip off and copy for my own livery. So I'm looking for something like a yellow stripe along the car. If you've seen the Legend that I've done, it's got sort of a yellow frame around the door windows, and that's kind of harks back a little bit to the yellow roll cage on the Caterham. Obviously there is no roof on that, so I haven't got a roof colour as such, but the yellow framework looks quite good on the Legend. In this case it's a big heavy GT car, so I might go with the yellow around the windows. I might just go with the yellow full roof. I'll see how it looks when we get to it. But basically this layer 1 isn't looking like it's going to be very helpful to me, so I'm going to turn that one off, and then below it we can see now layer 2. So a bonnet section, I could copy the bonnet. If I wanted a whole yellow bonnet, I'd probably want a bit less than that, so it's not quite working for me at the moment, so I'm going to turn off layer 2. Nothing's jumping out. Usually I find that there's quite a few of these that don't really do anything for me, but there's almost always something that you can use. This might be interesting with the sort of bonnet vents. I could maybe have some black patches in the vents and yellow between them, so I might come back to that one. That's layer 6. Okay, now we're talking more like the usual JWR colours. So this looks like the windscreen strip, and then right down the roof and along the engine cover is a stripe, and you can see that it tapers in and it kind of follows the body of the car, and that's because the guys at iRacing have already worked on this and they've made it look correct. So this is something that I quite like the look of. I'm probably going to come back to that layer 7. I'll have a quick glance down to see if there's anything else. Maybe something in that one, but at the moment, again, a different sort of a stripe, but I prefer the 7. This front bit might be interesting. Quite like the shape of that nose, or the bonnet, sorry. Again, a different stripe option. It's a smaller stripe. How does that compare if I go and turn on layer 7 again? So I've got a bigger stripe down the car. I'm going to have a red base car, black around the stripe and a yellow stripe. So I think this is probably the one to go for. Yeah, there's nothing else jumping out at me so far, so I think I'm going to go back. There's a similar concept there, but I think I'm going to go back and have a look at that number 7. Right, so what I want to do now is I want to basically rip off bits of this livery. So if I select number 7, probably the best way to do this, I can either pick certain sections of colour, or I can pick all of the consistent colour pieces and then delete them out as I don't want them. So I'm going to go for that option. I'm going to select everything that's green, literally do a copy, and then if I turn off that layer, come down to my bonnet stripe, paste it above, make that a new layer. So you can see now I've basically ripped off all of the green from that layer and it's become a new layer for me down here. So now I'm going to turn off some of the other bits and pieces. I can condense. If I turn 7 on in there, turn it off at the group stage and condense that. Okay, so these are the bits that I'm after down here. We've got the stripe on the bonnet, the stripe across the windscreen strip. I might not use that, but I'll keep it for now. And then the stripe down the back of the car, the roof and the back of the car. So if I come up here, I'm going to select the pieces that I want. Select those ones, that one as well. And then if I zoom in, there's a couple here which I wasn't quite sure what they were, but I'll keep hold of those for now. So with the bits I want selected, the easiest thing is to do an invert and delete. There we go. So I've now got just the bits of green that I was after. I'm going to merge that down. So it now sits as part of my bonnet stripe layer. So if I turn on and off that layer, you can see I've got the stripe showing on top. Now I don't really want green. I'm going to have a yellow stripe. So again, for now I'm just going to keep it simple, 100% yellow, not doing anything special. I'm going to paint all of those pieces yellow. It looks like when I selected the green, it's missed out a little bit in there that had text over it, so I'm going to fill that in as well. There we are. So now I've got my yellow bonnet stripe, as it's called. I could just send that to the car, to the simulator, sorry, and jump back in and see how it looks. But before we get there, I'm going to have another go at doing a few extra bits as well. Ultimately, I'll put a black edge border around this, but I won't do that just yet. I'll come back to that later on. Right, what else do we want to do? Let's drag in a quick logo and stick that on the side of the car. So the easiest way to get a logo is going to be for me to open up the logo file which I've got stored elsewhere. There we go. And if I come down here, it's going to go on top of my bonnet stripe, so I select that layer, paste it in and make it a new layer. Now that's come in. You can see it's on top of the yellow bonnet stripe, but it's below the mask and everything else, so I need to first of all make it much smaller. You can manipulate this in a few different ways, but what I'm going to do to start with is basically just make it 10% of the size, see how that looks. So we've pasted in our logo. Let's name that, and from there I'm going to drag it into position. Stick it on the door. Maybe it is a bit too small actually. Let's make it a bit bigger again, maybe 50% bigger. Scale that. There we go, something like that on the door. As I said earlier, you can use these lines to get it to line up. I don't really want it to overlap the door handle. There's lots of lines here at the bottom, suggest it might be curving round the sill, so I'll have a look at that when we get back into the sim. That doesn't look like a bad place for it. I'll leave it there. Obviously I will put some on the other side. I won't bore you by making you watch me bring in loads of logos. It's the same process repeated. So I might go and do that now. I'm going to jump on, pull in a few more logos, and then once I've done that, I'll pull up a video again and show you how to export it and load it in the sim. Okay, so here we are. I've pulled in a few different logos now. You can see I've got the JWR on the two doors. I thought I'd try something slightly different now because of the red J and R on the red background. I thought I'd try a white logo outline on that side and black on this side. So obviously I'll have a look in the sim, see which one I prefer, and then whichever one I prefer I'll mirror across to the other side. I've got a couple of Missed Apex logos on the what I think is the front sort of bumper, so wraps around. You can see the arc of what I presume is the wheel arch there. And I've got a James Wingfield Racing on the windscreen sun strip, and up here these two look to me like it's going to be the front and the back surfaces of the rear wing, so I'll put a few logos on that. I thought I would make a couple of other changes. Clearly you can see across the windscreen strip here this isn't going to show up very nicely, so I've created a new layer, and what we can do is I can actually draw freehand using this selector. So I'm going to select a bit of the screen, and I'm going to use the mask, so that green line I can see shows me pretty much where the colours need to go, and I'm going to draw around that. There we go. So I've now selected a section there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it black. So I've got a black sun strip. There we go. So I've now got a black sun strip on there. I could put it in front of the James Wingfield Racing logo, and obviously it will sit on top and cover it up. So I'm going to drag it underneath, and now hopefully that just looks a bit nicer. I've got the same kind of thing on my MX-5 livery, and I quite like that. And I think what I'll do whilst I'm at it is scroll up a bit and do the same kind of thing on the wing up there. So again, if I create a new layer up here, create a wing, I'm going to, for this one I can probably do it with a straight box because it's a simpler shape. Select that box, paint it black, and again I need to drag it down below the two texts. I'm assuming, to be honest, I haven't loaded it into the car yet, but I'm assuming one of these will probably be upside down. For some reason iRacing tends to have one of them the right way up and one of them upside down in the templates, so we shall see when I get there quite what that looks like. So that's not too bad. The other thing I usually do, again as a copy from my real car, is put wingers across the back, so I thought we could do that. Let's add a new layer for wingers and go over to the text field. Where's that? There we go. I think it's lowercase, it is, yes. So we're doing wingers. 62 seems to be a bit too big. Let's come down a bit. Something like that is probably about right. And I'm going to change the colour to yellow. This isn't going to work on the yellow background, but I'll cover that in a second. In fact, what I'm going to do temporarily to make it easier, I'm going to turn off the bonnet stripe so at least I can see what we're working with. Right, so we now have our wingers text here. What I'll do is I'll move that to a new layer, layer transform, 90 degrees counterclockwise. So again, this is where, actually I'll turn off the other wingers below it. That layer we didn't use. This is where the mask, sorry, the wire is very helpful. This looks like it's the middle of the car, so if I get that 1, 2, 3, nearly 4 boxes down, and up we're going 1, 2, 3 boxes up, so you can see straight away that that doesn't look like it's centered, so I need to move it up a bit. There we go. Call that wingers. It's not actually the right font at the moment, but I'll deal with that later. It shows you the intention. And actually one thing I can do before we go is on this layer I'm going to put the border on it because I can show you how to do that. So let's select, with that layer selected, I'm going to select all of the yellow. I'm then going to go selection border. Let's see what it looks like with a 5 pixel border. Oh, far too big. Selection border, maybe 2 pixel on this scale is a bit better. Right, so I've now selected that yellow text and I've added a border of 2 pixels to it. So what I can do now is I can basically, if I place this as a new layer, this is going to be wingers border. So I've done that in order, so I'll do it again. I'll select that, selection, border, 2 pixels, and for now I'm just going to cover it with a paintbrush. You can do it with a solid fill instead if you want to be a bit quicker about it. There we go. Obviously that's covered up the yellow, so if I drag that below the yellow, you'll see I've now got a nice, if I turn off that, you'll see I've got a nice black border around my yellow text. which is basically how I've done it in the real car. As I say, it's slightly the wrong text, but slightly the wrong font, but there we go. It's thrown in roughly in the right place. I think from there, with the wingers on the back, we've got a few logos here and there. If I turn back on the stripe, I think it might be worth jumping into the simulator and having a look, see how it looks. First go round, I'm probably going to turn off all of that mask and the wire and everything like that, so that I can get a bit of a cleaner look, see where this all comes out, and then from there I might turn the mask back on again so that we can start fine tuning. So first of all, we're going to do a save. That saves the full file we're working on, and then, as I said earlier, we just need a two-dimensional picture to load into the simulation software. So how we're going to do that is we're going to call it car underscore, and then for me it's 411513. So that 6-digit number is unique to each person's iRacing account. For me, that's what mine is. You can find that out if you go back to the iRacing UI. If you click on my account, then it will tell you what your account number is, and you can save your version of the TGA accordingly. So I'm going to export that. Perfect. Now, to actually load it into the simulator, there are two ways of doing it. I can either upload it to Trading Paints, in which case it will be available for everybody to download. Whenever I'm in a session with them, it will automatically download my paint scheme and show me in the right scheme on their computer, which is great. Ultimately, that's certainly what we want to do, because if I have it saved just locally on my computer, when I jump in it might look all correct, but everybody else around the world isn't seeing me in my colours. And if I'm racing on a live stream, for example, whoever's running the stream computer needs to have my colours if I'm going to actually appear correct on the stream. So finally, I need to upload this to Trading Paints so that everybody else can see it. But whilst I'm working on iterations like this, there's no need to do that. I'm just going to save it locally on my computer, and then that will override anything in Trading Paints, so I can jump into the sim, refresh the screen, and see what it looks like. So I'm going to jump in and do that now. Okay, so we finished the livery. I've exported my TGA file, and what I've now done is I've saved it on my computer. I've moved it into the iRacing Paints folder. So within iRacing, I think it's My Documents, iRacing, Paints, and then there's a folder for each car. So within the Lamborghini folder, I've now dropped my car underscore, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever your numbers are, .tga. So let's have a look in the game. So I've jumped in here. If I'm in any session, you can do this in, basically. So you can do it in a local session or an online session or anything like that. It doesn't really matter. As long as you put that TGA file locally on your computer, it should show. So what you have to do is load a session and jump into the car. So I've just loaded the centripetal circuit here. Obviously I've loaded the Lamborghini because you have to load the right car. There we go. I've seen the wing mirror's just gone red. So if I jump out of the car, now we're seeing what it actually looks like. So as expected, it's a little bit rough and ready at the moment, but we'll fine tune from here. So bring up the camera. There we go. So as you can see, I've got the red car, I've got the yellow bonnet stripe that we saw. That doesn't look too bad. It might be worth putting it into those, if I go forward a bit, might be worth actually putting it into the bonnet scoops. Might be quite a nice way to do it. I'll have a look. If not, I don't particularly like the red scoops with the red bonnet, I have to say. So I might, if we don't go with yellow into those scoops to continue the stripe, what I might do is make them black. Zoom in a bit. The little Mist Apex M's you can see on the front bumper, they look quite nice. The splitters get in the way a little bit, but maybe slightly smaller would work. The logos, clearly that's overlapping the number, so I turned off the number panels when I put the logos on, and that you can see was a bit of a mistake, so I need to reposition them slightly. The JW on that side is quite subtle. On the other side stands out a bit more. I'm not overly keen on the white. Might have a look at that another way. What have we got? What else did we do? We did the windscreen stripe. That looks good. Maybe slightly higher the text. I think I could do with just pulling it down a little bit, the sort of gap between the top of the letters and the top of the black is slightly less than the bottom of the letters, but actually that looks really nice. I like that. And then at the back we've got the rear wing, haven't we? So James Wing for racing on the rear wing, that looks good. What do we have for the underside of the rear wing? Yeah, as expected, looks like it's upside down. So I don't actually know which of the two pictures are upside down, but I'll swap them both over and have a look. Wingers on the back of the car there. What does that look like from a sort of more normal angle? It's obviously a bit skewed because of where it's positioned, so I think that needs to... I'm not quite so keen on that. I might even put that on... I'd either put it on the wing or maybe take it off completely. There's quite a lot... A bit of sun glare going on in this particular time. But there's quite a lot of back of the car that we could put things on. I usually run a number 13 on the back, so it looks like I could put a 13 on the back there. And the rear wing, for the underside in particular, it needs to be much higher up, so it sits across the top of the wing. Otherwise, we're not really being able to see it. Okay, that's interesting though. So there's a few bits to look at and learn from. Logos need repositioning. All in all, though, you can see how it's worked out. I should say that the yellow wheels is something that doesn't come from the livery itself. That's still done in the iRacing paint pages, so you still have to do that through the beta UI. What do we think of the actual yellow stripe? I quite like the yellow stripe actually. I think it's nice. It's a bit more, it's certainly wider than I've got on other cars, but I think the size of the car and the roof etc. make that work. We've got some slightly strange features going on as it goes across the louvres. I'm tempted to make it a little bit narrow so it doesn't overlap those louvres actually. So maybe we can tweak that. Okay, well, let's leave that there and jump back into the editing software and have another few updates. Okay, so let's jump back into the GIMP software. I've played around with this a little bit. I've made the mods that we were talking about, so I can show you quickly what I've done. So for example, the bonnet stripe, that's what I've done. It used to be a bit wider. You can actually see when you look at it in detail here, it does kind of overlap the corners of the engine sort of louvres, which does seem a bit strange. So I've taken that out. I've made it thinner so it doesn't overlap those. What I've actually done here is I've kind of matched it to about the size of the yellow on the windscreen sun strip. I thought that might look quite nice. I wasn't sold on this yellow stripe at the front. I might lose this bit of yellow yet, but these patches here look to me like they are the actual pieces of bodywork around the vents. So I thought I'd just see what they look like black. So I've done that. Shuffled the logo back a bit on both sides. For now I've left one still with black and one with white, but I'll look at that later. The mist apex is slightly smaller so it doesn't crash into the front dive planes, and I've guessed at the top one being the back wing, so I've rotated that upside down and I've moved it right to the top of the panel to see how that works. I think this is the back of the car, so I've put my 13 on that, and for now I've just taken the wingers off here because it didn't really fit very well. So that's what we've got in the editing software. If I don't want to export it with I'm going to turn off the mesh again just so that it exports a bit cleaner. There we go. So I will do a save and an export. If we go back into the simulation software, you don't actually have to come out of the session and reload it or anything like that. What you can actually do is just copy the new TGA file in. If I come back into the session, do Control R to reload it, it will just go white at this point. In fact, it's interesting. Good point here is I think this should be showing you what parts of the car you can't paint. So you can see most of it has gone white. There's a few bits around the lights and things and these dive planes that I can't paint. But generally, we've got pretty good freedom on this car. Yeah, that's interesting. I've not really considered that before, but that looks like that's working. So if I now jump in, do test, keep an eye on the wing mirror, there we go, it's loaded the colour, and jump out. Okay, So Control F12 again, let's see what it looks like this time. So the missed apex at the front is a bit smaller, doesn't crash into the dive planes, which is nice. That side as well. The logo doesn't crash into the number now. Bottom of the J does sort of fall off the door slightly, but what do we want to do? Probably on that side I'd say it should go up a bit, so that maybe just slightly above the door handle so that the J doesn't drop off the bottom. On this side the same, it's slightly low on the J. You can see I hadn't really lined it up very well along the length of the car, so that one needs to come forward a bit, but slightly up, so that's fine, we can look at that. What else have we done? So the windscreen strip, I've just dropped the lettering slightly, and that seems to be a bit more central, so I like that. Down on the bonnet here we made some changes, didn't we, to the patterns in there. So I have clearly got some black on the sides. There's another patch of red still showing, so either I need to find the red. It was white a minute ago, wasn't it, before I loaded the scheme, so it should be in there somewhere, but I think I need to do a little bit more work on locating that. I probably do prefer that black, I think, actually. I'll see what it looks like with the middle bit turned yellow as well. And what have we done on the wing? So it looks like we guessed the wrong one on the wing. That has changed the upper wing, which is now backwards. If I look underneath, that won't have changed the bottom wing. 13 has appeared where I wanted it. It's a little bit too big. It's just kind of dropping off a little bit. But that looks alright, quite like that. So I think I'll just shuffle that down slightly and swap the two wings around. Okay, so here we are back into the GIMP software. Let's have a look at the wings first of all. So if I turn that back on, you don't have to work with the wire mesh on all the time, but I do find it, as I say, quite useful to help line things up. So this is where I need to swap them both back round again. So layer, transform, rotate 180. Let's turn that one back round. And because that is the, which one was that? That was the front side, so I want to put that probably back in the middle of the overall wing. Okay, and then I will, now I know which one's which, I'll name them a bit more usefully. Wing front, wing rear. So this is the one that we want to make upside down. So layer, transform, rotate 180, and then this needed to be right at the top, didn't it? Let's see how high we can get it right up there. Okay, so that bit's done. Yeah, this was two sections of the inside. I wonder if this red bit here is probably the other one, actually, I guess then, isn't it? Let's have a look at that. So if I go down to the black layer, this I should do a bit more accurately than I'm about to, but for the speed of just doing it quickly, I'm going to select that bit, make it black. There we go. I'll just do one side. What else was there? The logos needed slight adjustment as well, didn't they? So yeah, it's kind of what we thought earlier, where all these lines get close together, it's often an indication of a kind of out of plane change in the body shape. So let's move that one up to get it back on. It's going to cross the door handle. This one wanted to come forward as well, didn't it? Let's leave it about there. So if I try and line them up a bit, so I've got the number panel, and then it's one line backwards, and I want to sort of get it lined up. You can overlap a little bit at the bottom, but that's about where it wants to be. On the other side, number panel, one line backwards, and again it can overlap a little bit on the bottom. That's about where we want it. This side I needed to bring it up. Let's try that. The 13 was close, but not quite right. So the 13 is created in two layers, as I showed earlier. So because the text I can edit, if I go to the text layer, I should be able to change it from size 80. So it wasn't too far, it was only a little bit too big, wasn't it? Let's get about 74. Okay, but I did need to move down slightly from where it was. Let's try him about there. So if I put that onto my new layer, so I've copied and pasted it, so effectively I've got another version of the yellow 13. So I've selected that. I'm actually going to delete the yellow bit, then go select border. So now I've got the border selected and the layer is actually empty, which means if I now fill in that section, that's going to be my 13 border versus the one before, which was there. So I'm now going to select the old one, delete everything that was on that layer, and then I can just merge that one down and merge it down into the 13 border layer. Turn on the yellow again, and we've got that one done. So I think that was probably enough. There's a quick change there. Yeah, see what that black bit's done. Repositioned a few of the logos. What I might do this time is leave the mask on, I think, just so that you can see how it looks, and I'll leave these number panels on as well, so it will basically export exactly what we're looking at. It will be helpful for positioning the wing text more accurately, because I'll be able to see how many of these white lines are actually present. So let's do that one. So again, I'm going to save the file. By doing it this way, I do find it nice and quick to cycle through them. So I've just made a quick change, changed it on the system. I'm still in iRacing, so we can jump back in and have a look. So as before, it's showing the old one at the moment. So if I go Control R, there we go, it's cleared the old paint. Jump in. Okay, so you can see now we've got the white and the green text lines, sorry, all over the car. So it's a bit messy, but it will help us identify exactly what's going on. So JWR on the side is in a better place. What have we managed to do on the bonnet? Let's have a closer look at this. So that hasn't, I don't think that's helped us, has it? So I've got a black on the inside part of the centre section. Okay, so that's what it's done. So the black I added on one side, you can see, is actually the side of the vent on the middle web. So I need to do that on both sides, but there's another section still that I need to find. So I'll have to still do a bit more searching. One thing that's useful though is I can see from this now with the mesh on that I've actually got, what is it, it's like a 4x4 mesh on each of those panels. So when we go back to the software, the editing software, I should be able to look for that 4x4 panel. JWR on that side is much better placed as well. On the back wing, that is pretty central, isn't it? That looks okay. Underneath, so we have got it. Yeah, the tops of those letters are just where we want them, aren't they? And you can see from the lines vertically at the sides, it's central. So that's good. The 13 is also sitting nicely on the panel. So I think actually those changes that we've just made have generally been pretty good. A little bit more hunting around to do for the bonnet, which is always the kind of tuning that you end up doing. Something I forgot to look at earlier is the yellow stripe, but that does miss the louvres quite nicely, so I do quite like where the yellow stripe goes. I need to add my black border onto that stripe still, which we can do all the way along, both the nose and the roof. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Right, let's jump back in and a few more tweaks. It's going to be more of the same, to be honest, so I probably won't run through all of that. If I take the headset off, yeah, you're definitely getting an idea of how you jump back and forth to just fine tune the body and the paint that you want. So I'm going to keep playing with that until I've got something that I'm happy with, and then I'll show you the end result before I jump into something like a spec map. Okay, so I've finally finished tweaking all of the little bits and pieces in the livery now, at least in the base livery, the paints part of it. There have been several more sort of iterations of jumping in and out of the simulator, so I've been making changes in the image software, exporting them as a TGA, loading it into the simulator, jumping in, refreshing the paint, having a look at where everything lines up, and then kind of repeating that. Most of that I did with the wireframe on, just as you saw earlier when I was looking for the bonnet scoops. As soon as I turned on the wireframe, it was really helpful to tell me exactly where that was, and when I jumped back into the image software, I could immediately see that the sort of 4x4 pattern of white lines is where that was. So that's just an example of how it really helps. There is kind of one little bit which I still haven't finished off, which is the door handles. I can show you in a second. The door handles are still red over the top of my logo, so I kind of need to do that, but I can do that as a little bit of fine tuning at the end. What I wanted to jump onto next was to show you guys how to do the spec map. So first of all, let's have a quick look in the image software at what it looks like. So you can see up here, what I've got showing is the actual 2D picture that I've exported. Simple red background, all of the different colours that you can see on top of it. I can turn the mask and wireframe back on, and it will make it a bit clearer for you. So you can see how this lines up on the car. As I say, these sort of black sections on the bonnet were part of the scoop. It turns out that this was the wire pattern that I needed to find, so that was the other part of the scoop that was still missing, and I think this middle part that's kind of overlaid on the windscreen here was one I'd already made the change for. Using the same kind of thing, I found a couple of yellow sections here which were the wing mirrors. I wanted yellow wing mirrors, and I've done that. And the rear wing end plates, I tend to use a Union Jack on those, so I've put that in there. Tweaked the logo just so that it's got black text, which I quite like the look of in the end. Otherwise, it's pretty much as you last saw it. So that's what it looks like in here. Obviously, I've turned off the wireframe and the mask and everything else before exporting it. I've exported that as a TGA. And if we switch now to the iRacing software, I'm going to pop on my headset and I can show you what it actually looks like in the car. So here we go. So this is how it actually looks in the end. You can see the yellow bonnet stripe is there. The black border either side of the yellow, I think it makes it look a lot nicer, look a lot more finished. Slightly narrower down the roof so that it lines up with the yellow wing field, but it's all done. Logos on the side, you can see here, if I just kind of go in a bit, where the door handle's still showing red, and it crosses over the logo. So I can do a little bit more work on that in the background. But other than that, it's pretty much as I want it. The number font again is not quite to my liking, but I'll do that outside of the image software. So yeah, that's basically the base level of paint. No spec map applied though, so let's jump into the image software and see what that does. Okay, so we've finished off with the paint now, so back into the image editing software, and I'm going to have a look at the spec maps. So we've covered this bottom layer group now, the paintable area. The mask section, so this turn off before exporting TGA, is similarly kind of not important for the spec map, so it doesn't really matter what we do with that. The top layer group is the one we're now interested in, so this is the custom spec map. There's a few different ways that people work with this, but the way I find really easy to deal with it, I'm going to show you now. So within that, iRacing have already split it out into 3 separate layer groups. There's the blue channel, no use, green channel, roughness, and red channel, metallic. So at the moment, blue makes no effect. It has no impact at all to iRacing. And if you look at the others, the way they've dealt with it is a base paint layer and then a parts layer for both of those other active colours. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete all of that. I'm actually going to delete all of that I find it much simpler just to do it with a single kind of colour, or not necessarily one layer. I'm going to call the first layer spec white, and then another layer for spec black. So I'm not going to call it spec white, I'm going to call it spec base, because I think I've got kind of a base spec map colour that I want for the overall car, and then I tend to have black for a lot of the stickers, and I might actually want another one on top which is spec red. So let's put 3 layers in there. So the spec base you can choose. So you can go from 0% to 100% metallic with the red scale, and 0% to 100% green rough, sorry, with the green scale. So the first thing to do with this, I would say, is just to make a single colour, what colour should we go for? Let's go, first of all, let's go for a green. So I'm going to paint the whole thing green, and export that to my car spec. So to export it for car specs, it's not the car underscore and the number, it's actually car underscore spec underscore and then the number. So if I export that, what I'm going to get now is I'm going to get the car 100% rough and 0% metallic. So I can show you how that looks. In fact, what I might do, rather than doing it that way, I might skip a slight step here, and I can do kind of half and half. So let's draw something like that. I'll stick with one channel. So in here we've got 100% green, and now I'm going to make it 0% green. So because the way the colours actually sort of add up and multiply together, 0% green and 0% red is basically black. So if I put a black stripe down the car there, what we'll see when I come into the simulator is this kind of the left hand side of the car is going to be 100% rough, and the right hand side is going to be 0% rough. So let's export that. There we go. To load it into the sim is exactly the same again. So I'm going to just jump into Windows Explorer, copy and paste both of those files now into my paint folder. And if I jump into the sim, I can do Control R, which reloads the paint. So in the sim you can see the car looks nice and glossy on one side. As I rotate around, you can see certainly here at the back is a really nice example. Actually, the sun is reflecting off that glossy right hand side of the car, and the left hand side of the car is completely matte, so there's no reflection at all. That's quite clear just at the back there where we've got the sun reflection. Yeah, you might prefer the glossier side overall, or the matte side. What you'll probably find is you want bits of it to be either side, either colour. Usually the stickers, so on this side there's not much reflection of that Mist Apex sticker down on the floor there, because of where it is on the car. But generally the matte stickers, I would say, are probably quite nice, whereas probably a glossier finish to the paint of the car is normally what I would choose to do. So yeah, you can see quite nicely there how the gloss works, how the roughness is working. Let's have a look at the metallic. So if we jump back in here, I'm just going to quickly turn the spec map off. How should we do this? Let's do it in 2 pieces. I'm going to do the front part of the car on the left hand side and make that bit red, and then at the back let's so what we've got here, we've got 100% green, 0% red. Here we've got 100% red, 0% green. Obviously the black is 0 and 0, so the last colour that we haven't got is 100% green and 100% red. It's going to come up as yellow. I could change the blue on any of these. I can change the blue scale and it makes no difference at all. So if I were to paint it white or yellow, it's actually exactly the same thing for the spec map, at least at the moment, because blue doesn't do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint that rear quarter yellow. Is it not? Yeah, So I've got a real mismatch going on here, but it should be quite effective for showing the different colours in the sim. I'd definitely recommend to do this same kind of approach with your own colour schemes. It's a really nice way of seeing how it works, and you can try all sorts of different things. There's no better way than just trying it for yourself. Okay, so now we're seeing lots of different colours on the car, which is strange considering it's basically all the same red. It's actually the same colour car. Yeah, so the right rear of the car is yellow in our spec map. And that's the result. If I go around the other side, you can see this left rear side is still not glossy or metallic, so that's still the parent red matte colour. The front left, we've got gloss, and we've got what do we have there? We had 100% metallic and 100% shiny. It was smooth because there was 0% roughness, and you can see it's kind of a real chrome effect. In fact, the white of the number panel does come out as a true mirror finish, so you can really see the reflection coming out there because it's perfectly smooth and it's perfectly glossy. So you end up with a really interesting chrome effect, which is maybe what you're after. It's not always. I think you can go over the top with it, but that's how you achieve chrome anyway. So a white base colour, and then 100% smooth and 100% metallic. And if we go around on the front left, sorry, the front right, what was that? We had, I think from memory, this was 0% metallic, but it was gloss. It was smooth, so it was glossy. But yeah, as I say, you can certainly see very different colour effects from the same basic colour car. So what I'm going to do is jump back into the spec map. What I normally do for my cars is I have a scale of metallic that I like to use. I'm going to double check what that is, but I think it's about 50% metallic, so it's not quite this sort of chrome dark red, but it does give it a bit more depth to the colour than just pure the matte finish. It's probably closer to this front right hand corner, but the stickers and the number boards and the logos, they go very dull. You can see on the windscreen sun strip that it's a very dull sticker across there now compared to the rear wing. So I want to specifically take out the sections of the logos that I want to stay reflective. Yeah, so I've cleared that out, and I'm going to now paste it with the sort of default that I tend to use, which, as I say, it's 0% green and 50% red. So it's 50% metallic and still 100% smooth. So you can see the actual colour that comes out is this kind of darker red. So if I make my whole base map that colour, my whole base spec map that colour, and now I need to undo that from any of the areas that I specifically don't want it. So what I usually do is come down here, the logos for example, I don't want those to be metallic at all. I want those to stay as the base colour. So I'm going to go alpha to selection on that layer. It will select all of the colour section of that layer, which means when I come up here and go to spec black, I can now fill that in. There, so effectively what you see in the spec map is now you're kind of going to start to see the logos reappearing, but in black, just so that they don't have the base map below them. And obviously I put the black on top of the base so that you can see it here. Let's go back, that was the left hand side. I can do a few others. So the right hand side is going to be the same. I'm just going to do pit box. I've not really experimented with pit boxes being glossy or metallic or anything. I presume the spec map applies to those as well. Worth checking. I haven't got into that, but I'm just going to leave them as black for now. If you've tried it yourself and you know what it does, then let me know. So you can see by having all of those things on different layers, I'm able to select them quite easily. Arguably it would be even easier if I put them all on one layer, but then you kind of move them all around together, and I'd rather keep them separate in case I want to sort of shuffle them about a bit. But I've ended up now with my spec map being, the base colour is is this kind of dark red, and on top of that I've got black for all of my stickers and logos. So let's export that. So I'm going to save the project. Obviously this is where the layers is key, because I can now save one project with my spec map at the top, but if I turn off the spec map I can always get back to what I want underneath. If I flattened it all onto one layer, then obviously I would overwrite my actual base paint. So I'm going to export that to the TGA for the spec. I'm going to copy it into the paint folder, and then we can go and have a look to see how it works out in the sim. So let's reload the paint, jump in the car. Okay, now we're starting to see this turn into something that I like. So you can see that the red is now quite glossy. It's got a slightly deeper red to it, especially if I come back a bit. You can see it's a nice shiny finish to the paint. Where the sun is reflecting, it should reflect quite nicely on, again you can see it on the back of the car there, it reflects quite nicely. But things like the 13 logo are kind of, they're still bright yellow. They stand out on their own. The same with the logos on the side of the car. They can go a bit dull if you're not careful. I have experimented actually in the past with making things like the yellow stripe not so glossy, and then the yellow stands out a bit brighter, which is something you can do. And if I bring the roughness, if I play with the roughness as well, I can actually turn the yellow into gold, which again I've tried playing with in the past. But yeah, for me, I actually quite like that as a finished colour scheme. So I'm going to leave it there. I might do a couple of little tweaks, things like I mentioned earlier, where the door handles are just not quite filled in properly, and the rear wing isn't carbon. I might make the rear wing a carbon effect. But generally, I'm very happy with that, and I think that's about as much as we can do with the paint and the spec map. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm just going to jump back into iRacing software and correct the fonts for the number, and that's also where you can change your wheel colour if you wanted to. I'm quite happy with yellow, obviously if it's the colour scheme. So for me, I think I'm going to leave it there. So hopefully that makes sense to you and you've learnt something there. You're a lot clearer with how to create these liveries for iRacing. I think it's the same for all the other simulators as well. As I say, they're slightly different maybe in the way they do spec maps, but the concept of using something like the GIMP software to build up layers and then exporting those layers as a 2D flat picture will be exactly the same on everything. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful to you. Have a look out for my Lamborghini, and in the next couple of weeks we should be racing at Sebring. I don't think we're going to be doing the Bathurst 12 hour. In fact, the Bathurst 12 hour is actually tomorrow at the point I'm recording this, so it'll probably be have already gone by the time this video goes out. So we won't have done Bathurst, but we are going to do Sebring hopefully, and if not, then keep an eye out for me in any of the VRS sprints or sort of weekly endurance races. Come and say hi. And yeah, like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content we're putting out. Next week I'll probably try and get out another highlights package. We had another great fun JWR race night last week, so I'm just putting together the video for that, and maybe some commentary over the top. A lot of action, a lot of exciting races, 5 more races again, all different cars as we did last time. So yeah, definitely stay tuned and keep an eye out for that. And if you want to get involved, we're thinking of probably 3 weeks time, so the 19th or 20th of March for the next set. So yeah, ping us a message and you're more than welcome to get involved and come and race with us. Cheers guys, and I'll leave it there, bye.